New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
From the New Thought Media Network, this is the Conscious Reality Show with your host, Sara Nichols, where conversation plus intention reveals a new reality. Every week, Sara and her guests will discuss what they know and what they don't. Experimenting in front of everyone with what else is possible. I'm Sunny Childs, and here is your host, Sara Nichols.
Thank you, Sunny. That was our producer, Sunny Childs, who isn't here today. We have Reverend Michael subbing in for Sunny. Thank you so much for coming. And hey, everybody, I'm so glad to be here today. I honestly have never been so excited as I am to have the guest that we have today. And mostly because she has shown me already so much about how ageist I am. Basically, much more ageist than I thought I was. I actually would have probably tried to parade out to you how anti-ageist I already was before I read Ashton Applewhite's book and before I watched her TED Talk, and everything about the stuff that she has put out has really rocked my world and already changed my life. So I know that it's going to be true for you as well. Oh, there's Ashton already on screen. I guess
taking notes already.
Yeah, taking notes. I can see why. Yeah, I learned. Welcome, Ashton. Welcome, Ashton.
Thank you.
Applewhite, the author of This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism, and what a manifesto it is. And I really didn't think that I needed you or my book or your book. Now I'm calling it my book because I'm living with it right now. I'm going to say that I read all of it, but I actually only read the first 5 chapters and then skimmed the last few because it was transforming me too fast. I really needed to slow down.
You can put that in as a complaint on Amazon.
Yeah. This book transforms people too fast. No, I learned, and actually in my newsletter and blog this morning, I confessed, I'm ageist. How ageist am I? And how ageist is everyone else? And I'm interested in what they'll look at. I learned that I am. I think I'm falling into the I'm not Ray trap more than I want to. And we'll find out what I'm not Ray is and all those things from Ashton. So Ashton, I've already been transformed by your book, but other people haven't read it and haven't met you yet, if that's possible.
Entirely.
Tell us the top things people think are true about aging that really aren't. Those are some of the ones that those myths about aging and age that you walk through, I think are really important to debunk.
Yeah. I mean, the first point that almost goes without saying is that aging is a unique journey for each of us. It's a journey. And so, and I think the stereotype that aggravates me the most, although I'm easily aggravated, is this idea that old people are alike. That's at some point we fall off a cliff and become the elderly.
Yeah.
And not only are all stereotypes, of course, wrongheaded and ethically problematic and just incorrect. They are especially so when it comes to aging, because the longer we live, the more different from one another we become. There is more diversity, more heterogeneity between 50-year-olds and 70-year-olds than there is between 50-year-olds and 30-year-olds, for example, right? Because the longer we live, the more our individual experiences transform us. So what is right for me or appropriate for me or attractive to me, it may be totally different or not available to someone else. So it is this idea of how that we grow even more different from each other. So how absurd it is. All stereotypes are absurd, but they are especially inaccurate when it comes to growing older.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yet people online, go ahead and ask questions in the comments if you're watching us live with Ashton Applewhite. And maybe Ashton or I will tackle the question. I loved that you also you're not really, you are talking about the olders, as you call us, but anyone, but it's a relative term, and that's why you use that, right?
That's it. And you get huge props for saying us, as someone whom I'm guessing has more road behind her than ahead. You wouldn't believe how many rooms I am full of with people in what I call age land. They write about age, or they're gerontologists, or they do aging services, and they're, clearly in the second half of life, and they're still talking about older people as them. And that is a sign for me that they haven't done the basic reckoning that you opened the show with, which is, oh, geez, this idea that old people are other and that oldness is somehow lesser or sad or icky or tragic, that they have not, processed that. And aging can be all those things, but it's also a lot of other things. So, I'm in the both sides of the story business. It's not that the scary stuff isn't real, but there's so much internalized denial. And I just want to say, I'm still ageist. You're still ageist. What makes the difference is that the minute you become aware of it, I think you start to see ageism around us, right?
Yeah.
And that is liberating, right? Then you're like, oh, it's not just that something awful is wrong with me. It's baked into the culture, the media, etc. And that means we can come together and do something about it. So you are being anti-ageist just by acknowledging that, just by learning that, just by learning that you are different in the world.
Well, I had an example yesterday of something that I would not have seen this way if it hadn't been for your book or your work, which actually really surprised me, because in a way it was at the other end of the spectrum. I'll explain. So Monday I was crawling around on my floor at this vacation home that I get to go to, and I noticed how hard it was for me to get up. I was in this weird little corner going through boxes, and as I was getting up, I was like, oh God, that was really hard getting up. And I had a thought about, oh, it's only going to get harder, and getting up is hard, and that's one of the main problems with aging. So I just noticed that thought, and then yesterday I was in a friend's backyard, and there was the giant cage back there with 4 kittens in it. Huge cage, like a place to keep them safe, because their mother was feral, actually. And then but had been being fed by somebody one of my neighbors, but wasn't being converted to a tame cat. Totally feral. But here are these little kittens, and they were trying to find homes for them. And the neighbor's grandson was in this, I emphasize, giant cage with the kittens, playing with them, right? A huge cage. And it was time for him to get out and go do something else. And as he got out, he had to duck under the door of the cage and then come up, and he was unsteady on his feet, and he couldn't get out, and he was like, can you help me? And I reached out my hand to help him, and he is 10.
Yeah.
He is a healthy 10-year-old who needs help getting up out of a space that is really pretty large with an opening that was pretty large. That I noticed, oh my God, it's hard getting up off the ground in weird little spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I know I went into the Apple store to figure out how to have my credit cards come up on a different order in Apple Pay. Of course, she said, "Have you tried this?" I was like, "No, I walked in here and asked you." Charming, very young woman, and she said, she said, "I just did this the other day, but I wish I could remember how I did it." And she was definitely in her 20s. And I burst out laughing and I did explain why. And she took it in the spirit intended. But it's like people think old people can't remember anything. Young people can't remember anything either.
Right. Oh my gosh. It is helpful that for me, because I counsel and coach a lot of younger people, that I do see their minds being all over the map. That really does help me.
And if we can
Yeah.
avoid blaming it on age and think
Yeah.
it's never because of age. It's important to get up and down on the floor. And there are times like where I do find myself like avoiding it because it is harder for me to get up. One of the most helpful things I read was like, get up and get down, keep practicing. But, if I were an athlete, right, it wouldn't be hard. If as things are, it's never, my daughter she was at a birthday party for someone who was 38, and they were going on to a club and go to dance a little bit. And a friend of hers said, "I'm too old for that." And my daughter, who has been brainwashed by her mother, said, "You might be too lazy, you might be too cheap, you might be too tired, you may not be in the mood, but you are not too old for it."
That's not a reason.
That's not it's never,
It's
or
not
too
really
young.
it's not a valid reason. Yeah.
But because of an ageist culture, we use too old or too young as
As a
placeholders,
stand-in.
typically for insert sad, sorry thing or insert positive, sexy thing.
Right. As if that's all the same thing. Yeah. Some of the other myths that you busted that I thought were really important, and I noticed on your "Yo, is this still ageist?" I think these come up over and over again too, is all that stuff in the news about how the youth of today, there's too few young people and there's too many old people, and the youth is going to be stuck with the old, and it's a tragedy, and it's a financial tragedy, and all that stuff. It's not true. It's made up. It's like a prevalent belief,
Oh yeah.
and it's made up. And I have echoed that, like, just in terms of being afraid that, I mean, there are reasons why Social Security could go bust, but it doesn't have anything to do with that.
I mean,
Right.
Social Security helps people of all ages. It helps families. It helps widows. It helps people with disabilities, for one thing. Secondly, it's really well run. Thirdly, if we had a decent social safety net, a lot of our totally legitimate fears about growing older and becoming incapacitated, those fears are real. You're not going to hear me say, "Oh, just have a positive attitude and they'll all go away." But this notion of old people as a burden, and it's called the age dependency ratio. It assumes that over age 65, typically, it varies in the context, you suddenly become a useless economic burden. And because we live under capitalism, your value as a human being is tethered to how much money you make. So all the caring that people do, most care for older people and young people, most care for old people is done by other older people. None of that, so much of it is unpaid. So much of it is women's work, shocker. That has colossal economic value, volunteer work. And of course, also lots of people keep on working and making money to the end. Not that that's an argument against the argument. The argument itself is economically and ethically profoundly flawed.
I really hate the "when are you going to retire" question. And
that was the working title. That was my first working title for this thing. When are you going to retire.com.
That's great. I love your current title. I love the title you went with, but that's also fantastic.
It took a while. Yeah. And then inspired by my in-laws who kept being asked that. And yeah, and it's not an okay question, and a really good all-purpose rejoinder, because you can never think of that thing you wish you'd
Yeah.
said. In
What is
French,
it?
there's a phrase for it in French: l'esprit de l'escalier, the spirit of the stairs, the thing you think of on the stairs as you're leaving.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what is it? What do I think of on the
You,
stairs?
you're very close already. You say, what do you mean by that?
Mm.
Without gotcha, without being snarky, because putting people on the defensive just doesn't. It might make you feel good in the moment, but then
I do tend to be snarky, so that's very
too.
helpful for me to have
hard.
something
It's hard.
useful. It reminds
Why are you
me
calling me young lady? That's just not
Oh.
a helpful response.
What do you mean by that? I
What do
like
you mean by
that.
that? And then
I
they have to reflect, and it is uncomfortable, and it does take courage. But and sometimes you're somewhere, if it's your boss, you might not want to correct them. You might not want to correct your boss in front of a lot of other people. I have received corrections privately, for which I'm very grateful, when I've said something in a talk and they've said, you might want to rethink that. And I'm like, oh my God, are you ever right? Thank you so much for coming and telling me, not asking it as a question in front of everyone.
Yeah.
If we don't speak up, we don't change.
What do you mean by that?
The culture change is uncomfortable. These are habits, deeply ingrained habits that we all have, no judgment.
My husband is an environmental leader in California, and he is involved in a lot of the most important environmental issues of our day, and has been for a really long time.
For him.
And people, and he's 65, and people ask him all the time, when are you going to retire? And he is a very modest guy. I'm not particularly modest. I like to brag on him, but he would never brag on himself. And but it makes me go, why would you want him to retire? Why on earth would that be something that would even, like, maybe it would benefit him, but he would be able to make that decision if he wanted to.
It's easier to rise to someone else's defense. I learned a lot about that during, up in my anti-racist game during the pandemic, during Black Lives Matter, to point, if you hear a comment that you think is ageist or racist or whatever, if you don't feel you can or should speak up in the moment, go to the person afterwards and say, that didn't sound great to me. Are you okay with it? Can I support you in any way? Would you like, so that you are an ally in that moment? But yeah, I mean, my daughter is a facilitator, and I learned from her that saying why is a little bit more aggressive than what do you mean by that, right? Because then it doesn't seem so attacked. So
yeah, I love that.
She says, and then I know I'm in trouble. She says, tell me more. And then I'm like, oh
God. In spiritual circles, I've learned when someone says something that I think is completely full of shit, to say, you may be right.
You're just digging a hole deeper. That's all right then.
You may be right. Well, that's just a survival technique. That's like in dysfunctional family and all that. I was looking through, I think some of the other myths that I wanted to make sure people knew were myths. Most people end up in long-term care or nursing homes. Myth. Most people in nursing homes are very old. Myth.
Right. I would have guessed heading into this, and I knew nothing going in, nothing. I had no credentials, no professional affiliations, still don't. I would have guessed the odds were 20 or 30%. And at that time, this is of people over 65 ending up living in nursing homes. Even my language is not okay, right? I'm using loaded language. So ending up in institutional care I would have guessed 20 or 30%. At that time, it was 4%, and it is now 2.5%.
That is so good to know. 2.5%.
Nursing homes, because people in them require skilled nursing care, as do young people, right? It's not age-based. Yes. It's physical and cognitive capacity based. And the vast majority of those people have advanced dementia. I mean, another myth, is that we're all going to get dementia. It's a terrifying disease. The care burdens are immense, but only there's still a lot of people, but only 9 out of 10 brains do just fine to the end. The curve goes very up very steeply in your into your 90s. I'm not saying it's great news when you're 85 or at any point, but it is not typical of aging. Speaking of both sides of the story, dementia rates are dropping. The odds of anyone watching us now getting Alzheimer's have gotten lower and lower, and people are being diagnosed at later ages. There are more people with it because there are more old people, and age is the primary risk factor. But the fear that when you can't find your glasses, that totally understandable, what is the first sign? It's almost certainly not the first sign of anything more serious, and that gasp of fear makes us more vulnerable to exactly what we fear. Having a positive, which I translate as accurate, attitude towards aging, understanding more of what's actually likely to happen, confers protection against Alzheimer's, even in people who have the gene that predisposes them to the disease.
Yeah, now you're singing our song in terms of the New Thought ministers that lead this New Thought network, because what we teach is that what you believe is what comes into being, and so that our thoughts have power. Not that you always have to focus on the positive, but you have to be aware also to pull the weeds of the consciousness, which is probably largely unconscious bias that we have, where we're sure that these things are true and therefore they become true. And we know that, we teach that. What we teach in Centers for Spiritual Living is how to reliably work with spiritual principle to create more of the life that we actually want. And a lot of that is about where is the focus of our attention, and examining our thoughts, and are our thoughts true?
Right, because most bias is unconscious. Bias is deeply ingrained habit, and it's really, really hard to break habits, especially when it comes to values. I think I'm curious about your take on that. But the very first step is what you talked about in the first 2 minutes of our conversation, like, oh crap, this stuff has taken up a hold inside me, and we can't challenge something unless we're aware of it.
Yeah. Well, I was starting to say at the beginning that I've fallen into the I'm not Ray trap that you talk about, which I really loved in your book, which, as I understand it, is the idea that I'm comparing myself to someone else my age, and there's various ways of doing that, right? And the one that I have done the most is the first one you say, which is where I'm trying to make sure that you know that even though what am I now? I just turned it 64. I'm not like some other 64-year-old that, as I put in my blog this morning, I noticed that I like to talk a lot about the fact that I still backpack. Still, the word still even is that's part of it. Like inevitably I won't backpack, right? That's my thinking. And of course, there's so many people who are 30 and 40 who have never backpacked and never will backpack. So it's irrelevant.
Right. Or you can, like, you might not take the black diamond. No, I don't ski, but you might not ski a black diamond anymore. But you can we can almost always find ways to do the things we love to do. But we often cannot do them the way we did when we were younger. And I mean, I think sex is an example where we get better at it, to tell you the truth. They're often,
I do too.
And so we can find ways. My dentist, of all people, was in a chairlift with a guy who was in his 90s, and he knows about my work. And he said, "What's your secret?" And why do people put it that way? Like, why does it have to be a secret? That's a whole conversation in itself.
Yeah,
to which I don't know the answer. But the guy said, "Don't be an idiot." And he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You can't ski at 90 like you could at 40. Don't be an idiot." And my colleagues at Old School and I turned that, one of us in particular, who is a movement specialist, turned it into a program called Move for Tomorrow. Ski today, hike today, as though you hope to hike tomorrow. right? And with the expectation that you will hike or whatever your hiking happens to be, and you will greatly increase the odds that you'll be able to do that, some version of that, right to the end.
Yeah, I like that. Don't be an idiot, and that does help. I hike. I go shorter distances
Yeah.
on my backpacking, and I carry a thicker inflatable mattress, and I have fewer and fewer people that are 64 who want to do it with me, but there's also not that many other people who do either.
Maybe
And that
it's
may
just
be
you.
just they don't want to be with me for that long. That's entirely possible. But what I did notice is that I want everyone to know that I'm doing that kind of thing, because I don't want them to see me as old, which falls into the I'm not Ray.
Hey,
Yeah.
we all, yeah, and Ray was a coworker long ago who I learned was exactly the same age as me, and he's kind of portly, and he was bald, and he had a little fringe of white. I mean, he looked sort of like Santa Claus. And
Mhm.
my first thought, which was in hindsight, is not, I mean, awful, like so mean-spirited and so ignorant and so
Yeah.
dumb. But I thought, geez, I hope no one finds out that I learned his birthday fell within a month of mine. I hope no one finds out, because then they'll think I'm old. And, I have since learned, and it was such an insult to my colleagues. It's like they had no trouble telling Ray and me apart. And Ray retired at 65 and went to Florida. And that's the old age he was. And he travels, and he's curious, and he's happy as can be. That's his 65, and it's probably his 72.
Right.
How old I am now. No judgment. But this, of course, pattern of comparing, and when we are
Right.
assaulted with ideas from childhood on that to age is just this downhill sad thing old people do, it's understandable that we distance ourselves. And one of the biggest, headbangs for me was aging is not something old people do. We are all aging from the minute we're born, just as we all experience ageism from childhood on, right? Anytime a kid hears you're too young for that, or what could you, a young person getting started in the job market, what could you possibly know? Well, maybe they know a lot. Any judgment on
Yeah.
of age.
There were a couple things that I've been like talking about for years that I didn't see in your book. So it might be because, and I have actually had trouble running down the real background or proof of these things. So, but one of them I heard, and I do have the recording where Deepak Chopra talks about this, but I don't know what he's basing it, where the research is that he's basing it on. But he talks about a study that went around the world to the parts of, I forgot what the phrase is, but the places where
The
longevity is. Yeah, blue zone.
Yeah, I can finish the sentence before you even get, the famous blue zones, where people,
he goes,
where there are more centenarians statistically than elsewhere.
And what he said was found in this particular study he was citing was that it wasn't food, it wasn't water, it wasn't anything else that accounted for longevity. It was the cultural norm of the attitude towards aging, which allowed for the longevity. You're looking a little fuzzy on the screen, Ashton, so I hope that I can hear you when you speak.
No, that was me screwing up my face. I would say that the most, I don't, Chopra may well reference studies of which I'm unfamiliar, of course. To me, if you had asked me way back when, what is the most important component of a good old age, I would have said health. Second, I would have said wealth, and neither of those is the case. It's having a strong social network. And all those people live in all the blue zones. One's a Mormon community, one's in, some are small villages where everyone lives together from birth to death, all ages.
Yeah.
I have to say that there is a prize every year called the Ig Nobel, Ig as in Ig plus Nobel prize.
Yeah.
And it was awarded this year to the Blue Zone study because someone did a study of all the studies and established that a lot of these were places where there was just crap record keeping. Oh, Japan was another. A lot of these centenarians had died 20 years before.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that actually the demography underlying these findings was flawed. So the whole thing is under question. But we know that being physically active, I happen to have been lucky enough to go to Sardinia many times because my godmother had a house there. So I would come and mooch off her. That's if you don't invite me to the Yosemite. That's,
Oh, I see. Yeah, you
back.
have hinted already. Yeah.
And but these people live in tiny rocky villages where they're going up and down steps all the time. Greece, I think Ikarios in Greece is another. But they live in community. They eat a healthy diet, right?
Yeah.
So all those things do matter. But back to what you were saying about attitude, something I like to point out is that an awful lot about aging we cannot control, no matter how wealthy we are. Though, these tech bros who are spending millions taking, 1,000 supplements a day and getting all kinds of personalized, customized healthcare and injecting themselves with the blood of young people, blah, blah, blah. They still look a day older every day to me, right? But one thing we can control is what we know about a subject and how we feel about it. And that has an enormous effect on how well we age, and all sorts of spiritual benefits about which you know a great deal and I know nothing.
Well, hold that thought. Michael, let's go to our sponsor, acknowledge the New Thought Media Network that brought us here. And then we'll come back and talk more with Ashton Applewhite.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
From the New Thought Media Network, this is the Conscious Reality Show with your host, Sara Nichols, where conversation plus intention reveals a new reality. Every week, Sara and her guests will discuss what they know and what they don't. Experimenting in front of everyone with what else is possible. I'm Sunny Childs, and here is your host, Sara Nichols.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Our guest is Ashton Applewhite, author of This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Ageism. And so thrilled to continue this conversation with you. This is the part where we actually talk a little bit about you. It's all been you and what you think, but this is the Conscious Reality Show because we are in front of everyone changing reality. And I think you're changing reality with your book. You looked at what people thought was real and you examined it and you debunked some of the reality.
These were new ideas to me.
So let's look at what you think is real in yourself more, and see what we can do with that. So is there anything bothering you right now that you would be willing to work on in front of everyone?
Sure. I mean, yes, and full disclosure, Sara did ask me if I was willing to talk about this in front of all of you, but I could actually take this earplug out because in 2018, I was diagnosed with an acoustic neuroma, which is a benign brain tumor that grows out of the cells in your ear canal and bulges into your brain and gradually cuts off your hearing. And I was getting deaf. So they found out I had this thing. So I had radiation treatment, but I continued to get deafer, even though they did a follow-up MRI, blah, blah. And this fall, they did another MRI and went, oh, that treatment didn't work. And now it's too big and too close to your brainstem to radiate. The radiation oncologist said, actually, no amount of radiation is safe for your brain. So I'm like, thanks for your candor, kind of.
Okay.
So on December 23rd, I had a 7.5-hour procedure. I have a doozy of a scar. They go in from here all the way down to there. It doesn't show, but and I mean the hair is grown in, but
yeah,
it was a thing. And I healed the incision healed in 2 seconds. I was very lucky that I didn't have any balance issues because I no longer have an acoustic nerve or a vestibular nerve. And your ears are very important to how you balance.
yeah.
And they didn't paralyze my facial nerves, the biggest risk. What a win. And they only nicked my vagus nerve. So I only had to do 6 weeks of vocal therapy. And I was very lucky because they were very skilled. However, I'm still tired from it. And I saw a neurologist yesterday and I have headaches. And the headaches are probably related to the tension of the surgery, but actually they originate in my neck, not my brain. So probably being tense and terrified for months hasn't helped. But I am trying to, I write about how we age well by adapting to change, like not hiking up Mount Everest, anymore, or not. I mean, cognitively as well. And the challenge for me has been, and she's put me on like painkillers, which worked instantly, but I don't want to take a fistful of painkillers every day. And I'm doing PT,
Yeah.
and I am very lucky in that it appears my cervical spine is full of arthritis like the rest of me. That's my ailment, my bones. Everything else in me works great, much like a younger person. That it hasn't affected my arms, and that it seems to be mostly back here. It's occipital neuralgia. This is your occipital bone, the base of your skull. So it's something that massage will help, hopefully. And PT and all sorts of tiresome, neck exercises will help. So rather than something mysterious inside my brain, which they just really don't understand headaches, and they're really, really hard to treat. But I am trying to understand healing in a more holistic way. And I am trying to reconcile myself. The neurologist said just yesterday, what she said was, you don't look 70, 72. And what I gently suggested she say instead is, you do not present like a typical 72-year-old. But be that as it may, maybe being 72 is just catching up with me, right? I've always had tons of physical energy. I don't have that much energy anymore. Is that what I need to adapt to? And how do I?
All right.
All right. So we'll start with that one.
And is that what I need to adapt to? And what was the other question? How would I?
Well, I could reference something I've learned in a book, but maybe you want to tackle the first question first, or are they hand in hand?
We'll see.
Okay.
Let's find out. So, one of the main things that I teach and work with people on, and what I'm writing a book about, is that we have inner wisdom and we can know a lot more about our body than we think we know, just by it doesn't all have to be something that came from a book and came from a doctor. It can also be inner wisdom. So
I heard that from a physical therapist. I said, I don't know anything. She said, you know more than you think you do. You know a lot about how your body works.
Yes. And we know more than anyone on some level, right? Because it's our body and we're in our body. And that may be one benefit of aging as well, is being able to have more confidence in that, because we have more experience with being in our body and what it's like. So I would invite you to put your hand and trusting. Yeah. But the problem is we also may have learned not to trust ourselves for various reasons. So why don't you, if you can, if it's physically comfortable, or if you're able, put your hand back on the area that bothers you most, and dial into when it's at its worst, which might not be right now.
It's very. And also,
yes, but
I just switched yesterday from 1,000 milligrams of painkiller to 500. So
okay,
we're in transition.
So if a 10 is incredible, is the most possible pain and discomfort, what is it now?
Oh, 1.
Okay, and what has it been a bunch lately?
Well, I guess maybe I should come back, please, in half a year once we see whether I've weaned off the painkillers and how much these others have worked. It's never a piercing, terrible pain. The worst it ever gets. And it did hurt this morning. It's a 5.
Okay, you can take your hand back. You can take your hand off, so you don't have to. A 5. Okay. And if you were to, what's the worst thing? I think you've said it, but what's the worst thing that you believe about the trajectory of this particular thing?
I guess that I would have to learn to live with chronic pain, which I know people who do, and this is really, it's not searing, awful nerve pain, and that it will continue to deplete my energy in ways that will be no fun to adjust to. And I don't like waking up as is. I'm not a morning person. I don't know how you do a show at 9 a.m. is early for me. Waking up in pain really sucks.
Okay.
You know?
So I'm going to ask you some questions that are about clearing consciousness around this. And some of them will be kind of ironic given your specialty, but that may be not ironic. It may just be exactly why you're here. So if you will just humor me by saying yes to when I ask you if you're willing to destroy it and create these polarities, that will help. So, and I'll probably close my eyes because I'm listening to my own inner wisdom on this. So everywhere you decided that every pain has, and every persistent pain has an inevitable trajectory where it's just going to get worse, and it always will get worse, and I will just have to live with it, and everyone lives with it, and therefore what am I whining about? And everything that is times a gazillion, are you willing to destroy and uncreate right now?
Yes.
Yes, right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all 9, shorts, boys, pobets, and beyonds. That hocus pocus is the clearing statement from Access Consciousness, which is meant to take all the polarities that we live in around these things and to open up for what else is possible. And my favorite prayer, which I think is a great prayer for anyone at any age, is whenever we feel stuck. It doesn't sound like a prayer. It's really just a question. So that's even better for people who don't consciously think they have a spiritual life, right? Is what else is possible? So when you feel stuck, when you don't know the answer, when you don't know what to do, say aloud. And when you're stuck in traffic, what else is possible? So if you could say that now.
What else is possible?
And how does it get even better than this? And that means literally, how does it get better than this is right now? How does it get better than this? Can you say that?
And how does it get better than this?
Yes. How does it get better than this? And what else is possible? Those questions are not assignments for people like us who, are writers and researchers. And, it's not an assignment. it is a question, an open question to the universe. And my only assignment is to be curious. And you're very curious, or you wouldn't have written a book. Right. You're clearly very curious. So just to be curious, yes, that feels like a really high vibration. I don't know if you can feel how light it gets when there is a question or a concept that really is true. But that's how I tell the difference between yes and no, is that it feels light if I get goosebumps, and if I have like a lightness, then I know that's true. So what else is possible puts me in a point of curiosity where I can just open my mind to all these things, right? And you know for a fact for the world that all sorts of stuff that you've been told before is not true. And so you're able to be curious about what is possible and how does it get better than this, right?
Very much. And I'm scientifically and medically and sociologically curious about how healing works. Yes.
And maybe resist. I mean, if you get an inspiration to do a specific research, do that. But otherwise, just open your eyes and wait for like it to appear, you know, for that email to come, or that study to pop up, or that friend who says something. Just see that the answers will be there and be interested in those answers. But I am going to say it's interesting that you've said all this, because it actually gives me a chance to say two things that I've been saying for years. I want to call to your attention New York Medical School, not to be confused with the New York University Medical School, which was started and run for, this program was started and run for a long time by Dr. John Sarno, and has been published in medical articles and peer-reviewed medical articles. They started asking the question about 15, 20 years ago. And you, this is the place where I noticed you take it in your book, and you just said it, you take this, and most people take this at face value, that there's something called arthritis, and they don't disagree with it, Dr. John Sarno. And this is the important thing, arthritis is causal of pain. They found that this was not the case. What they started to look at is, oh, wait, all the people who are being scanned come in with pain in body parts, and then they get scanned. Let's scan people who don't have pain and see what happens with their bodies as they age. And what they found was that, they found that from 40 on, every single person has arthritis, as in deterioration of vertebrae, of various bones, of various parts. But most of them, the vast majority of them, are not experiencing pain or discomfort. And they may have phenomenal deteroration in their entire spine and not be experiencing pain or discomfort.
I had before this hurt, this has, gone on forever. I'm hearing what you said, like to think of it differently, not as an inevitable, but I had a scan of my lower back. And the guy said, we see people with backs much worse than this who have no symptoms, and people with far fewer things going on who can't walk. And that was, I filed that away.
Yes.
So that's a data point that just supports your larger point, which is more philosophical and attitudinal.
Well, no, I mean, it's also scientific, right? It's just not causal. They looked at it, it correlates. But what is causal? What is causal is when you show someone a scan of their back when they're in pain and tell them it's arthritis, they believe they're going to have that pain for the rest of their life because it's deteriorated. And they will refer back to that scan and to the concept of osteoporosis or arthritis. And they've been shown it by a doctor. And this medical school has been trying to educate the medical field. Be careful. It's not causal. It's just everyone deteriorates. Yeah. And you happen to have them in your office. And so you've taken a scan and you're trying to find a reason why they're in pain. That's not necessarily the reason. So I know that's not actually what you're talking about here, but it's part of it. And I couldn't resist getting it in because it's one of my top things is to use the John Sarno research, because here he is an actual medical doctor who's done a lot of research in a medical school on various things. And he finds that a lot of what keeps us in pain is emotional. And then the more we care about other people, the more likely we are, that we are absolutely, more we care about other people, lost my train of thought, the more likely we are to store our pain in our body so that we can just hyperfunction to help rather than actually feeling. Yeah.
Unpack. So we should just be more selfish?
Kind of. Here I will, let me see. So here is a John Sarno. You can do a repeat after me, John Sarno, on what's going on with you. So you say, thank you, brain.
Thank you, brain.
For trying to protect me.
For trying to protect me.
From tough emotions.
From tough emotions.
By storing them in my body as pain.
By storing them in my body as pain.
I no longer need that protection.
I no longer need that protection.
I am willing to feel my feelings.
I'm willing to feel my feelings.
Whatever those are.
Whatever those are.
Yeah. How does that land for you? Does that anything about that feel true? It's weird, I know.
It's a big idea that I have to think about. I mean, I am very, very thinky. You know, I approach stuff through my rational mind much more than my feely brain, and think of myself as not introspective and not understanding myself well. So in a way, I'm trying to process the irony of being told to think about thinking less, think more about thinking less, if you will.
But you are directing your brain. You're not being told to, but you're directing your brain that you don't need protection from your feelings. That's the only thing you're doing. You could still do as much thinking as you want. I mean, you're a thinker. You're a good thinker. You're going to keep thinking. I'm sure there's no problem with that.
Doesn't need to protect me from my feelings. That's helpful.
It doesn't. Yeah. Your brain. What this is another thing Dr. John Sarno in his books and studies, you can see it. One of the things he found, and I'll send you a link for this and we can put up for the audience, but not that our producer would have it handy. There's an old 2020 episode where this producer went undercover because he was in so much pain and went through the John Sarno program and then did a whole thing on it. And he was blown away by being able to get out of a collar that he had been wearing for 2 years and being able to get off the floor simply by directing his brain to actually have him feel his emotions instead of storing them in his body. And they have found this isn't true for everyone, but for a lot of people, especially if they're in caring professions and really trying to help the world, will hyperfunction. And one of the ways in which they'll hyperfunction and help the world is by unconsciously directing their body to feel pain or discomfort instead of fear or grief or anger.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And but you can choose. You can also choose not to fear grief, to feel grief or anger, or
it seems ironic that we're actually talking about a brain operation as it happens on me, but I think for sure, and it's not the thinky part of my brain. So of the many, I had no idea till afterwards, thank God, how much more dangerous tricky it is to go in through the base of your skull. There's no room for error. You're right next to I-95. Here, it's no joke to have this part open, but you can kind of move the brain aside and get it where you're going. Here, no way. terrifying, and but I never had to worry. I stayed sharp. I woke up sharp. So I can't imagine how terrifying it is to have your processing, your thinky brain, for lack of a word, messed with, which I didn't have, but I still think part of the terror was how scary a procedure it was.
It is really scary. So this is a short version of a little session like this, and I normally would have a lot more space for all of this, but not on
quick
when we
learner.
do it live.
Just kidding. That would be like a not helpful way to think about it. I know.
Yeah.
I got to get a good grade.
And let me just quickly bless you in prayer, and then tell folks about next week's show, and then we'll go out, and then we'll stay live for a couple of minutes and just talk about how this went. And so take a breath with me, and you're going to experience, this is what we call spiritual mind treatment in my teaching. Take a breath with me and just allow it to return us to the only thing ever happening here: one heart, one mind, one infinite presence, all knowing, all loving, all redeeming, all delivering, beyond time, beyond space, beyond expectation, beyond limitation, beyond lack, beyond precedent. And I know that this unlimited power, the one, is living out its perfect life as me. And as I know that for me, I know that for Ashton, and for every life that she reaches. That each of us is a spiritual being having a spiritual experience in a human body on a human plane, with all the power and the promise and the purpose of the one mind at our disposal, and all the clarity, focus, ease, and grace. And so I speak my word with and for Ashton, knowing that she is whole, perfect, and complete, exactly as she is right now. That every cell in her body is recalibrating according to original divine blueprint and arranging itself in perfectly functioning organs and bones and sinews. And that if she chooses to, it is safe for her to feel any emotions that she has ever felt or not felt that are in there somewhere. But then none of that is necessary, because it is the truth of her being that she is whole, and she experiences herself as whole, and she experiences others as whole. And I know that this is part of what Ashton has come to the planet to do, and that she is healing herself and others through all the work that she does, as she reveals more about the unlimited potential of the human body, the human mind, the human spirit, no matter what the age. Thank you, Spirit, for what else is possible showing up here, for how does it get even better than this? What energy, space, and consciousness can Ashton Applewhite and her body be to receive all she is here to receive, and to be all she is here to be? And anything that doesn't allow it, I destroy and uncreate it all right now. Thank you. I let go, knowing that the unlimited power of law has acted upon it perfectly, and I let it be, and so it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just to, that's Ashton's website there. If anybody wants to grab it as a QR code, it's also in the notes underneath. And next week, I'm so excited. I have people on from the Butterfly Effect positive protest art movement. You can see the butterfly on the screen says, when oppression becomes law, resistance becomes duty. And it's so beautiful. And it's really cool. And we're going to get to meet these people and talk about what they're doing next weekend. As always, it's not too late to drop in on a month-by-month basis to my healing sessions. Look for info on that in the YouTube. And here's us. catch our show, subscribe to it, buy Ashton Applewhite's book, and keep coming back. It works. All right, go ahead, Michael. Take it away.
Thanks to our guest, to host Sara Nichols, and to the New Thought Media Network. I'm Sunny Childs, producer of The Conscious Reality Show. Join us live next Wednesday at 9 a.m. or stream the show at your convenience. Subscribe to Conscious Reality Show YouTube channel so you never miss a show. If you'd like to learn more about us, check out www.sarastevensnichols.com.
Well, we did it. There we are. How did that feel, by the way? I know that was a little rushed. Did you get any insights in the latter part that we just did? Anything that you think might be helpful?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have to think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, in the days after the surgery, and I could always get up. I was steady on my feet, thank God, except for the first 2 days. And so I wasn't incapacitated in that sense, no tubes, no nothing. But I would get back in bed and lie there and often not move a muscle for what felt like hours, probably 20 minutes. But I just felt like all this love from so many people all over the world, sustaining. It was like lying on I just felt all that energy. And people do thank me all the time for the work that I do. And
yes.
I sure don't take it for granted, and it really helps with the itch of I gotta go accomplish more things. I'm hit by a bus tomorrow. I've had an amazing, who would have thunk 20 years ago,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah. What's your definition of spiritual?
Oh, well, I mean, I believe that spirit, we, in the teaching that Ernest Holmes and Science of Mind does within Centers for Spiritual Living. And I consider myself a spiritual scientist. So I'm teaching people how to reliably work with spiritual principle. Well, what do I consider spiritual? Well, everything. Spirit is everything. So what it is to be spirit, there isn't anything that spirit is. There's nothing that isn't spirit. Spirit is the sun, the moon, the stars, oceans, bodies, everything. It is the ground of all being that has formed itself into all things. So what it is to be spiritual is really just to be conscious of that there is no separation, that there is nothing, that we're all connected, and that what we do affects everything else, right? Which is why the butterfly movement and which we're going to talk about next week, and what you're doing, the anti-ageism work, is so important.
But you're not just talking about other people, you're talking about the natural world and on forces.
Everything. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I and other Science of Mind ministers like Michael and all my colleagues, we are, I don't know if everybody would talk about it the exact same way, but the way I talk about it is we are working with people to work reliably with spiritual principle, to use what we know techniques are for reconnecting with the truth and for knowing that we are not separate, and for changing reality. I like to call it reality, capital R reality. There's the apparent reality, and then there's the capital R reality, which is the ground of all being, the connection between all, which some people only get when they're on acid or or mushrooms.
Or mushrooms.
Yeah. I mean, psychedelics have been, my path, not on a regular basis, but certainly useful. And I
Yep.
certainly believe that there is, energy out there coursing through all things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do you not consider yourself spiritual?
I don't, but I think it's because my understanding of it thinks that you have to have a spiritual practice, which
Yes. And you
and
do
also
not
I
have
tend to
one.
see
And that
it in
was one of the things you wanted to talk about, but we didn't get to.
well, we can't get that, but I tend to see of it as a bit of a dichotomy of thinky versus or I don't know, rational versus, I don't want to say religious because I know that's not what you're talking about. I mean, and by the way, my first title was So When Are You Going to Retire? For a while, it was I'm Not Ray. And then for a while, it was not seriously, but binaries are bad.
Hmm.
And of course, and that's been helpful. I've been reading a book called How Healing Works, which is a perfect example
Oh,
of what
yeah.
just stuff is going to land at your door, and it's going to. And you've also excused me from reading the entire book. Thank you very much, because I think I got. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. But being open to messages that come from wherever, and I think maybe just being more generous in my understanding of the term.
Yeah. Yeah. That could be. I mean, I will accept any and all judgment. I actually one of the practices I use is about how judgment from other people can enrich us, which really helps the more you're in the public eye. I bet when you're at your level of like TED Talk watching and all that, you can probably have a lot of judgment coming towards you. Like there was some comments today that I haven't seen those kinds of comments before, and I took it as like, oh, woohoo, we're in the big time.
Well, you notice I got rid of them.
Yes,
Well,
thank
yeah,
you. Well, they weren't well, we are alive, but they weren't critical, but they were offensive. Yeah.
Yes, so I got rid of them, yes.
If
I
they
mean,
were
it's
just
kind
critical.
of a good sign to get an emotional reaction from people, I guess. It shows that they're paying attention and that they're invested.
Totally.
Most of the pushback I get is from people who just say, I'm not old, or, I'm not going to ever call myself old, or this doesn't jibe with how I'm doing it. And
Right.
first of all, obviously you do you. I'm not the boss of you. And it has to have authentic meaning for you. And I have gotten better at meeting people where they are, which is essential. And getting older helps with that.
Mhm.
And I hope I never write another book, because writing a book is the most horrible task ever. I heard a great definition of it on a podcast ascribed to a writer named David Barr, but I haven't been able to find him. Writing a book is like reading a book, except the book is trying to kill you.
I don't know if I need, oh my God.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I don't know if I want to hear
time out.
I kind of want to go la 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 since I'm in the middle of writing a book right now. And I did want to ask you about like your pro tips for staying alive during writing a book. I'm under contract to a publisher to write a book, and I'm
just gonna
like,
mail you this sad index card.
okay.
But this time around, if I do one every 20 years, I have one more in me.
Okay.
And I think if it's going to be, I haven't even said this aloud to my partner, but if it's going to be as good as it could be, it would be a memoir of sorts. And I don't remember anything that happened to me. I remember what Mrs. Schmertz said to them in 4th grade. Fuck if I know. But anyway, they say once you start trying to, things come to you. I don't know.
Things come.
But I have a great title. Things I Used to Say.
Oh, I love it.
Which are things I used to think I knew, and I mean, my definition of wisdom, which is not a word you hear me use often, because the idea that old people are wise is in itself a cliche. Some old people are wise, some old people are idiots, some children are wise, some children are idiots. But is that you become you become aware of how little you know. I think I do know those things. I am more certain of those things. I do believe them to be, I don't know if the word is true or valuable or important, but you become ever in tandem, like a helix, more and more aware of all the things you will never know and you will never understand. So it's not going to be me lecturing people about, pronouns. At least I hope it won't be, but sort of how my view of so many important things has changed over the years and why.
Love it. Well, let's end on that note, and end our live stream. And if we want to stick around for a couple more minutes, we can talk about whatever we want to. What you guys can't listen. Ha. Nah, nah.
Bye.
Love you. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Thank you, everyone.